You walk into a bank with nothing. No savings, no collateral, just an idea and a smile. You ask for $1 million. They laugh you out the door. Now imagine you walk into that same bank, but this time you own a building worth $10 million. You want to borrow $5 million against it. They don't just say yes, they offer you a lower interest rate. They practically beg you to take more. This is the central absurdity of money. The less you need it, the easier it is to get. And the rich didn't just figure this out, they built an entire playbook around it. You've been taught that debt is dangerous, that it's something to avoid, something that traps you. And for most people, that's exactly what it does. But for the wealthy, debt isn't a trap, it's a tool. Sometimes it's the most powerful tool they have. This isn't about credit cards or car loans. This is about a completely different species of debt. One that doesn't drain you, one that builds empires. And the reason you've never heard it explained this way is because the system doesn't benefit from you understanding it. So let's pull it apart. Here's what most people do. They earn money, they pay taxes on it, then they spend what's left. If they want something expensive, they save up for years. Or they take on bad debt, high-interest consumer loans that eat away at them every month. The cycle is predictable. Earn, tax, spend, repeat. The rich do something different. They don't spend their own money if they can avoid it. They borrow against their wealth. And here's the trick. When you borrow money, you don't pay taxes on it. Loans aren't income, they're liabilities. So the IRS doesn't touch them. Let's say you're a billionaire. You own stock worth $500 million. Those shares have grown massively over the years, but you haven't sold them. If you sold, you'd owe capital gains tax. Depending on the state, that could be 20, maybe 30%. So instead, you go to a private bank. You say, "I'd like a loan. Use my stock as collateral." The bank looks at your portfolio and says, "Sure, we'll lend you $200 million at 2% interest." Now you have $200 million in cash. Tax-free. You didn't sell anything. You didn't trigger a taxable event. And that 2% interest? It's less than inflation. It's basically free money, especially when your assets are appreciating faster than the interest accrues. This is called buy, borrow, die. And it's not a secret strategy. It's just not advertised. You buy assets, you borrow against them, you live off the borrowed money. And when you die, your heirs inherit everything at a stepped-up basis, meaning they don't owe taxes on the gains either. The debt gets paid off from the estate, but the tax bill never comes. It sounds like a loophole, and in some ways it is. But it's also perfectly legal. It's been legal for decades. The system was designed this way. ProPublica published a report a few years ago showing that the wealthiest Americans pay an effective tax rate far lower than the middle class. Not because they're cheating, but because they're using debt to access their wealth without selling assets. Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Larry Ellison, they've all done this. In some years, they've paid zero federal income tax, not because they earned nothing, but because on paper, they borrowed instead of earning. The math is uncomfortable. A teacher making $60,000 a year pays a higher tax rate than a billionaire living off loans. The teacher's income is wage income. It's taxed immediately. The billionaire's loan is invisible to the IRS. And this isn't just about taxes, it's about liquidity without sacrifice. The rich stay rich because they never have to sell. Selling is for suckers. Selling locks in a tax event and gives up future growth. Borrowing lets you have your cake and eat it too. Now you might be thinking, okay, but they still have to pay back the loan. Sure, but here's the thing, they don't pay it back the way you'd pay back a car loan. They don't sit down and write a check. They refinance. They take out a new loan to pay off the old one, or they let the assets grow and use the appreciation to service the debt. As long as their wealth grows faster than the interest compounds, the system works forever. And if something goes wrong, if the market crashes, they have options you don't. They can negotiate. They can restructure. They have accountants and lawyers who do this full time. The average person defaults and loses everything. The rich renegotiate terms and wait it out. This is the fundamental difference. Debt for the poor is a leash. Debt for the rich is leverage. Let's get more specific. There are different types of debt, and not all of them work the same way. Consumer debt is the kind you know. Credit cards, personal loans, payday loans. The interest rates are high. 10%, 15%, sometimes 30% or more. This debt doesn't build anything. It's used to cover expenses or buy things that lose value immediately. A new TV, a vacation, the pair of shoes. The item depreciates. The debt remains. It's a losing trade from day one. Then there's secured debt. Mortgages, car loans, business loans backed by collateral. The interest is lower because the lender has something to take if you don't pay. This kind of debt can be useful if used correctly. A mortgage lets you buy a house you couldn't afford up front. If the house appreciates, you win. But if it doesn't, you're stuck paying for an asset that's worth less than you owe. But the rich use a third category: asset-backed lines of credit, securities-backed loans, portfolio loans. The collateral isn't a house or a car. It's stocks, bonds, real estate empires, private equity stakes. The interest rates are absurdly low because the risk to the lender is almost zero, and the borrower never intends to pay it off in the traditional sense. It's revolving, infinite. As long as the assets are there, the credit line stays open. This is how you get billionaires with 9-figure credit lines who technically have no salary. Now here's where it gets darker. This system doesn't just benefit individuals, it reshapes entire economies. Think about real estate. Why do housing prices keep climbing even when wages stay flat? Part of it is supply and demand. But another part is that the wealthy use cheap debt to buy property as an investment. They're not buying a place to live, they're buying an asset to borrow against. A penthouse in Manhattan, a villa in Miami. These aren't homes, they're collateral. They sit empty half the year while the owner borrows millions against them to fund other ventures. Meanwhile, the average buyer is trying to compete with cash offers backed by portfolio loans. They lose every time. And the price floor keeps rising because debt is cheap and assets are scarce. The same thing happens with businesses. Private equity firms buy companies using leveraged buyouts. They borrow massive sums to acquire a business, then load that debt onto the company itself. The firm extracts fees and dividends. If the company thrives, great. If it collapses under the weight of the debt, the firm walks away. The employees lose their jobs. The creditors take the hit, but the private equity partners already got paid. Debt, in this model, isn't a risk. It's a transfer mechanism. The risk gets pushed onto someone else. You're probably wondering, can I do this? Can someone with a decent income and a small portfolio use the same strategies? The short answer is maybe, but the conditions have to be right. If you own a home with equity, you can take out a home equity line of credit. The interest is lower than a credit card. And if you use that money to invest in something that grows faster than the interest rate, you come out ahead. But that's a big if. Most people use home equity loans to remodel a kitchen or pay off other debt. That's not leverage, that's just moving money around. If you have a brokerage account, some firms will let you borrow against your stock portfolio. The rates are relatively low, but there's a catch. If the market drops and your collateral loses value, you get a margin call. You have to either add more assets or pay back part of the loan immediately. If you can't, they liquidate your holdings. The rich can weather that storm. You probably can't. The system is technically open to everyone, but it's designed for people who can absorb losses, for people who have multiple streams of wealth, for people who won't get wiped out by a bad quarter. For most people, trying to use debt like the rich is like flying a fighter jet after reading the manual once. Technically possible, realistically dangerous. But here's the irony. The people who need access to cheap capital the most are the ones least likely to get it. If you're starting a business and you have no assets, no one will lend to you at 2%. They'll offer you a small business loan at 8 or 10%, with personal guarantees, with every clause designed to protect the bank and expose you. If the business fails, you're still on the hook. The bank takes your house, your car, your future income. But if you already have millions, the terms flip. The bank wants your business. They'll offer you interest-only payments. They'll give you flexibility. They'll let you borrow more than you even need because they know you're good for it. The system rewards success and punishes struggle. It amplifies inequality by design. So what's the takeaway here? Should you go out and borrow as much as you can? No, that's not the point. The point is to understand the game. Debt isn't inherently good or bad. It's a tool. And like any tool, it works differently depending on who's holding it. For the rich, debt is cheap, flexible, and tax-advantaged. It's a way to access liquidity without giving up ownership, without paying the government, without sacrificing future growth. It's a mechanism that allows wealth to compound faster than it ever could through wages or salary. For everyone else, debt is expensive, rigid, and punishing. It's a way to cover a shortfall or make a big purchase, but it comes with interest rates that ensure you pay far more than you borrowed. And if something goes wrong, the consequences are severe. The difference isn't just about how much money you have. It's about how the system is structured, the tax code, the lending standards, the legal frameworks that make it easier to borrow when you're already rich. And the most uncomfortable part? Most people will never be in a position to use debt the way the wealthy do. Not because they're not smart enough, not because they don't work hard, but because the entry cost is too high. You need assets to borrow against assets. You need wealth to leverage wealth. It's a closed loop. And once you're inside, it's almost impossible to lose. Once you're outside, it's almost impossible to get in. There's no clean ending to this. No satisfying resolution. You could argue this is how capitalism is supposed to work. Reward the risk takers. Reward the people who build businesses and create value. And to some extent, that's true. But you could also argue that a system where the wealthiest pay lower effective tax rates than teachers and nurses is fundamentally broken. That a system where debt makes you richer and income makes you poorer is designed to protect the people who need protection the least. Both things can be true at the same time. The rich aren't cheating. They're playing by the rules. The problem is, the rules were written by people who benefit from them. And until that changes, debt will remain what it's always been. A weapon for some, a prison for others. So next time someone tells you debt is bad, ask them which kind. Because the debt that's keeping you up at night, it's not the same debt that's building empires. And that difference is everything. If this changed how you see the system, hit that like button. And subscribe, because we're breaking down more of these hidden mechanisms every week. Share this with someone who needs to understand how money really moves. Thanks for watching.